I am Lorraine, 67 years old, and I never thought my son would look me in the eyes and scream those words. "You will rot in here." The terror that washed over me as Michael locked me in my own bedroom and left me to starve still haunts my dreams. What my son never realized was that the basement of our family farm held a secret that would be his undoing. When that message appeared on his phone a day later, his vacation ended abruptly. Before I tell you how I escaped this horrifying situation, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button to hear more survival stories from this old farm woman. My life before this nightmare was simple but fulfilling. Harold, my husband of 45 years, passed away 5 years ago, leaving me alone on our Montana farm. This place had been our home for 4 decades, every corner filled with memories we built together. The creaking porch swing where we watched countless sunsets, the apple orchard Harold planted when Michael was born, the kitchen where I taught our son to bake his first pie. Michael, now 42, left for New York almost 20 years ago to pursue a career in finance. Back then, I was so proud watching him graduate with honors in land, that prestigious job at an investment firm. Harold and I both were. We understood when visits became less frequent. Our son was building his life after all. But after Harold died of a sudden heart attack, something changed in Michael. His infrequent visits became even rarer, and when he did come home, there was an edge to him, a restlessness, a constant checking of his phone. The warm hugs became quick, perfunctory embraces. Our conversations grew stilted, his responses clipped and impatient. About 2 years after Harold passed, Michael started making comments about the farm. How much maintenance it required for one aging woman. How property values in the area were rising. How I might be happier in a smaller place closer to town. Or perhaps a nice retirement community where I could have people my own age around. I always shut down those suggestions immediately. This was my home. The only place where I still felt connected to Harold. I could almost feel his presence in the workshop, where he spent countless hours tinkering with old radios, in the garden where his favorite roses still bloomed every summer. Leaving would mean leaving him all over again. So I stayed, finding comfort in my routines. Mornings with coffee on the porch, with Scout, our ancient golden retriever, who moved as slowly as I did these days. Afternoons tending my vegetable garden, or volunteering at the local library. Evenings reading in Harold's old armchair, sometimes talking to him as if he could hear me. It was a quiet life, yes, lonely sometimes, but it was mine, filled with independence and peace. Michael never understood this attachment. His world was all about forward momentum. The next deal, the next promotion, the next rung on the ladder of success. He had his father's ambition, but none of his patience or appreciation for the smaller joys in life. When Harold first passed, I had fantasies about Michael coming home more often, perhaps working remotely from the farm for weeks at a time, maybe even bringing a special someone who might give me grandchildren to spoil. But those dreams faded with each rushed holiday visit and forgotten birthday. The last time I had seen Michael before that fateful autumn day was Christmas 10 months earlier. He had stayed exactly 26 hours, spent most of that time on his laptop, and left with barely a goodbye. I cried for 3 days after wondering where my sweet boy had gone. The child who used to follow Harold around the farm like a shadow, soaking up every bit of knowledge his father would share. The teenager who, despite his rebellious phases, would still sit with me on Sunday mornings to plan the week's meals. That boy seemed lost to me now, replaced by a stranger with my son's face, but none of his heart. A man consumed by a world I barely understood, with values so different from those we had tried to instill. Still, he was my only child, my last living family. I kept sending care packages to his Manhattan apartment, kept leaving cheerful messages he rarely returned, kept his room exactly as it was when he left for college, baseball trophies and all. I never stopped hoping that someday something would bring back the connection we had lost. That my Michael would return to me, not just the stressed executive who seemed to view his childhood home as nothing more than an asset to be liquidated. I had no idea that when that day finally came, it would nearly cost me my life. It was a perfect October day, when Michael's sleek black rental car, came rolling up our gravel driveway, kicking up dust that glowed golden in the late afternoon sun. I was on the porch shelling the last of the season's peas when I spotted him. My heart leapt at the sight. My Michael home without even a phone call to warn me. I dropped my bowl of peas and hurried down the steps as quickly as my arthritic knees would allow. Scout raised his gray muzzle and gave a single welcoming woof before settling back down. Even in my excitement, I noticed Michael did not bring luggage, just a sleek leather briefcase. Was this just a day trip? Had he driven 3 hours from the airport for such a short stay? Michael emerged from the car in one of his expensive suits, looking so much like Harold in his younger days that it made my heart ache. But while Harold always loosened his tie the minute he got home, Michael remained perfectly put together, like he was heading into a board meeting rather than visiting his mother. "Mom," he said, allowing me to hug him briefly before stepping back. "You look well." "What a wonderful surprise," I exclaimed, unable to keep the joy from my voice. "Why didn't you call? I would have prepared your favorite pot roast." "Last-minute decision," he replied, his eyes already moving past me to survey the property. "The farm looks different." It didn't, of course. If anything, I prided myself on maintaining everything exactly as Harold would have wanted. The fence Michael was eyeing had been freshly painted just last month by the Peterson boy from down the road, who helped with odd jobs. Come in," I said, choosing to ignore his critical gaze. "I will make some coffee. Or would you prefer something stronger after your drive?" Michael followed me inside, and I noticed how his eyes catalogued everything. The antique grandfather clock in the hallway, the handcrafted dining table Harold had made for our 25th anniversary, the oil paintings from local artists that we had collected over the years. His gaze had a calculating quality that made me uneasy. "Actually, Mom, I need to make a few calls first. Business never stops, you know." He stepped back outside before I could respond, pacing the front yard with his phone pressed to his ear. I watched through the kitchen window as he gestured animatedly, his voice too low for me to hear. Twice he glanced back at the house, a look I couldn't decipher crossing his face. When he finally returned, I had coffee brewing and fresh cookies on a plate, the same chocolate chip ones he had devoured as a child. He took one absent-mindedly, but barely nibbled at it. "Mom, I was thinking we could go into town for dinner tonight. My treat. That steakhouse you and Dad used to like for anniversaries, is it still open?" "The Silver Saddle." "Why, yes it is. That would be lovely, Michael. What is the occasion? Does a son need an occasion to treat his mother?" he asked, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I just thought it would be nice to catch up somewhere special." While Michael showered and changed from his travel clothes, I went to freshen up myself. As I passed the guest room, where he had placed his briefcase, the latch popped open, spilling several papers onto the floor. Being a tidy person, I knelt to gather them up, and my eyes caught bold text at the top of one document: property valuation and market analysis for 1425 Willow Creek Road. Our address. My hands trembled as I quickly shuffled the papers back into the briefcase. There were other documents, too, glimpses of legal language and what looked like blank signature lines. My stomach clenched with a sick feeling of betrayal. This wasn't a spontaneous visit after all. My son had come with an agenda. At dinner, I confronted him after our entrees arrived. "Michael, I found real estate documents in your briefcase. Are you planning to sell my home without even discussing it with me first?" His fork paused midway to his mouth. Something flashed in his eyes momentarily. Anger perhaps, before a smooth mask slipped back into place. "I was going to bring it up over dessert, Mom. I have been looking into options for your future. This farm is too much for you now. You had a fall last winter, remember? What if that happens again and no one is around to help?" "That was a minor slip on ice, and Mrs. Abernathy checks on me daily," I replied firmly. "This is my home, Michael. I have no intention of selling it." "Mom, be reasonable. You could get a beautiful condo in town, or even a luxury apartment in a retirement community. People to talk to, activities, medical care nearby if you need it." "No." I set down my knife and fork. "This discussion is over. The farm stays in the family as your father wished." Michael's jaw tightened, but then he sighed and reached across the table to pat my hand. "I am sorry, Mom. You are right. It is your decision. I just worry about you out here all alone. His sudden capitulation should have relieved me, but something felt off. Still, I wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe my son had my best interests at heart, even if his methods were misguided. By the time he ordered us both slices of cheesecake and a second glass of Merlot for me, I had almost convinced myself everything would be all right. To family, Michael said, raising his water glass to toast. To family, I echoed, taking another sip of the rich red wine. By the time we left the restaurant, a strange heaviness had settled over me. My limbs felt like they were moving through molasses, my thoughts sluggish and disconnected. I blamed the wine and my low tolerance after years of rarely drinking, but a tiny voice whispered that something was very wrong. "Are you all right, Mom? You look a little unsteady," Michael said, gripping my elbow firmly as he guided me to the car. "Just tired," I mumbled, my tongue feeling too big for my mouth. "And the wine. I am not used to it anymore." "Let us get you home and into bed," he replied, his voice sounding distant and echoing. The drive home passed in a blur. I struggled to keep my eyes open, my head lolling against the window despite my efforts to stay alert. By the time we pulled into our driveway, I could barely walk. Michael had to practically carry me inside. "I do not feel right," I slurred as he guided me to my bedroom. "Something is wrong." "Just the wine, Mom. Sleep it off." As he pulled the covers over me, still fully clothed, I thought I saw something in his expression. Not concern, but satisfaction. Then darkness claimed me. I woke briefly in the night hearing strange noises, drawers opening and closing, papers rustling. A man's voice. Michael speaking quietly on the phone. Something about signing tomorrow and power of attorney drifted through my consciousness before sleep dragged me under again. When morning finally came, I awakened with a pounding headache and a mouth that felt like cotton. Confusion gave way to suspicion as fragments of memories surfaced. The wine, the sudden overwhelming drowsiness, Michael's convenient explanation. With growing horror, I realized what might have happened. My own son had drugged me. The kitchen was empty when I finally made my way downstairs, still in yesterday's clothes and unsteady on my feet. Through the window I could see Michael pacing the backyard, phone pressed to his ear. His gestures were animated, his expression jubilant. I strained to hear, catching only fragments as he passed near the partially open window. "Yes, Peterson, we should be able to close by the end of the month. No, that will not be a problem. Power of attorney, medical assessment. Yes, I have the documents ready. Significant return on investment." My blood ran cold. Peterson was not just anyone. Thomas Peterson was the most aggressive real estate developer in the county, known for buying old family farms and turning them into vacation properties for wealthy out-of-staters. And Michael was clearly discussing selling my home, my sanctuary. I retreated to the hallway as Michael finished his call and came inside. I tried to compose myself to present a calm facade as I confronted my son. "Good morning," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Who were you talking to just now?" Michael startled slightly, not having heard me approach. "Just work stuff, Mom. How are you feeling today?" "I heard you talking to Thomas Peterson about selling this property," I said, cutting straight to the point. "And something about power of attorney." His expression shifted, surprise giving way to calculation. For a moment I saw a stranger standing in my kitchen, not the boy I had raised. "Mom, I think we need to have a serious conversation," he said, pulling out a kitchen chair. "Please sit down." I remained standing. "I am not selling this farm, Michael. Not now, not ever. The thing is," he said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone that made my skin crawl, "you are not really in a position to make that decision anymore. I have been speaking with Dr. Whitman in town. He agrees that living alone out here is no longer safe for you." "You spoke to my doctor without my permission." The betrayal stung. Dr. Whitman had been our family physician for decades. "As your next of kin, I have every right to be concerned about your health and safety," Michael replied. "The forgetfulness, the fall last winter, the way you cling to this place instead of moving somewhere more appropriate for a woman your age." I am not forgetful, and that fall was nothing. Every doctor appointment I have had confirms I am in excellent health for my age. That is not what Dr. Whitman said, Michael countered smoothly. Then let us call him right now, I challenged, moving toward the phone. Michael quickly stepped between me and the landline on the wall. That is not necessary. Move, Michael. Mom, be reasonable. This farm is worth over $1.5 million now. Do you have any idea what that kind of money could do? The comfortable retirement it could provide you, the opportunities it creates. Something in his phrasing made me pause. Opportunities for whom exactly? For me or for you? A flash of something guilt perhaps crossed his face before his expression hardened. I have worked my whole life to succeed, to make something of myself. I deserve what you deserve, what my home. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. You are in some kind of financial trouble, aren't you? That is what this is really about. You don't understand the pressure, the expectations. Michael snapped, his controlled demeanor cracking. One bad investment, a few risks that didn't pay off, and suddenly everything I have built is in jeopardy. So you decided to sell the farm out from under me, property that isn't even yours. It will be mine eventually anyway, he said coldly. I am just accelerating the timeline. I felt physically ill. What have you done, Michael? He laughed, a bitter sound with no humor. What haven't I done? I've got documents with your signature on them. Power of attorney, consent to sell, even a psychological evaluation suggesting early dementia. Those are forgeries, I gasped. I never signed anything. Close enough to pass. He shrugged. Being your next of kin makes things much easier. A concerned son looking out for his aging mother's best interests. I am calling the police, I declared, lunging for my cell phone on the counter. Michael was faster. He snatched the phone away, his face contorted with anger and desperation. No, you are not. You have no idea what is at stake here, Mom. I owe people, dangerous people. If this sale doesn't go through, I could lose everything. Or worse. That doesn't justify stealing my home, I shouted, fear giving way to fury. Your father built this place for us, for our family. Dad is dead, Michael roared, and he left me nothing but this worthless piece of nostalgic real estate in the middle of nowhere. The words hit me like physical blows. In that moment, I didn't recognize my son at all. This man, this stranger with cold eyes and calculated moves, could not be the baby I had nursed, the child I had taught to ride a bike, the teenager who cried on my shoulder after his first heartbreak. Get out, I whispered. Get out of my house. That is not how this is going to work, Michael said, his voice eerily calm now. I already have the wheels in motion. The sale is happening. You can either accept it and enjoy your new life in a very nice assisted living facility, or you can make this difficult. Your choice. I will fight you, I promised. I will tell everyone what you are trying to do. A dark look crossed his face. No, I don't think you will. Before I could react, Michael grabbed my arm and began dragging me toward the hallway. I fought, but at 67, I was no match for my son's strength. He pulled me to my bedroom, ignoring my struggles and protests. Michael, stop this! You cannot do this! You'll rot in here! He screamed, his face contorted with rage as he shoved me into the room. Until you see reason, or until this deal is done. The door slammed shut. I heard the distinctive click of the old-fashioned key lock turning, followed by the scrape of something heavy being pushed against the door. Michael, I pounded on the door. Let me out right now. I am going to Cancun for a week, he called through the door. Peterson needs time to get the final paperwork ready anyway. Maybe some time alone will help you accept reality. You cannot leave me locked in here. I need food, water. There is a half bath attached to your room, so water isn't a problem. And I left some granola bars in your nightstand. Consider it a cleanse, he added with a cruel laugh. I will see you next Saturday, Mom. Hopefully with a better attitude. Michael, please, I begged, my voice breaking. Do not do this. We can talk about this. We can find another solution. But the only response was the sound of footsteps retreating, followed by the front door slamming. and finally the engine of his rental car starting up. Through my window, I watched helplessly as my son drove away, leaving me imprisoned in my own home. As his car disappeared down our long driveway, reality crashed over me. I was locked in. No phone, limited food. No one expected to check on me for days, as I had told my neighbor Mrs. Abernathy that my son was visiting. Scout was outside, probably confused and hungry already. I slid down the door to the floor, tears streaming down my face. "Harold," I whispered to my long-dead husband, "what has happened to our boy?" The first day of my imprisonment passed in a haze of disbelief and desperate attempts to escape. I tried the door repeatedly, throwing my weight against it, until my shoulder ached, but the solid oak wouldn't budge. The windows in my bedroom were 15 feet above the ground, with no ledge or trellis to climb down. Even if I broke the glass, the fall would likely result in broken bones at my age. I rationed the 6 granola bars Michael had left, eating just half of one that first day, despite my growing hunger. Water I had from the bathroom sink at least. I cupped my hands and drank, trying not to think about when I had last cleaned the faucet. By evening, shock gave way to a bone-deep fear. Would Michael actually return in a week? What if something happened to him on his trip? What if he decided to extend his vacation? No one knew I was trapped here. I could genuinely die in this room, exactly as Michael had threatened, rotting away while he finalized the sale of my home. Night fell, and I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, too distraught to sleep. Every creak of the old farmhouse made me start hoping against hope that someone, anyone, had come to check on me. But the only sounds were the familiar settling of wooden beams and the occasional hoot of the barn owl that nested in our old maple tree. "Think, Lorraine," I told myself firmly. "Harold wouldn't just give up. There has to be a way out." I began methodically examining every inch of my prison. The door was solid, the lock secure, the windows too high. The bathroom had no windows at all. The floor. As I inspected the ancient hardwood, I noticed something I had overlooked for years. In the corner by my dresser, partially hidden under the edge of my braided rug, one of the floorboards seemed slightly different from the rest. The grain pattern didn't quite match, and when I pressed on it, there was the faintest give. Heart pounding, I dragged the heavy dresser aside with what little strength I had left. Kneeling, I worked my fingernails into the slight gap and pulled. The board resisted at first, then came free with a groan of ancient nails. Beneath was darkness and the smell of dust and forgotten things. I ran to the bathroom and grabbed my reading glasses and the small flashlight I kept by the sink. Shining it down into the space revealed what appeared to be a narrow passage. Harold had mentioned once that the original portion of our farmhouse dated back to the late 1800s. Could this be some sort of old servant's passage? A hidden storage space? Whatever it was, it represented my only chance. The opening was small, but so was I after decades of farm work kept me lean. I lowered myself into the dark space, flashlight clenched between my teeth, and found myself in a low, narrow tunnel. Cobwebs clung to my hair and clothes as I crawled forward, ignoring the skitter of tiny feet that suggested mice or worse shared this hidden path. After about 20 feet of crawling that left my knees raw and my back aching, the passage widened and heightened into what appeared to be a forgotten storage room. My flashlight beam revealed dusty boxes, old trunks, and farming implements from another era. But most importantly, a crude wooden ladder leading down through another hatch in the floor. This must connect to the original cellar, I realized. The farm's current basement had been built as an addition in the 1950s, and we rarely used the older section except for cold storage of root vegetables. If I could get down there, I could access the main basement, which had an exterior entrance for bringing in firewood and supplies. The ladder creaked ominously as I carefully descended each rung, threatening to give way under even my modest weight. When my feet finally touched solid ground, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I was in the old root cellar, just as I had guessed. And there, partially hidden behind stacks of preserved mason jars from years past, was the door that connected to our main basement. It was locked, of course, but the old padlock was more for keeping the draft out than security. I found a rusted garden trowel among the abandoned tools, and with considerable effort, managed to break the lock open. The main basement greeted me like an old friend, familiar even in the dim light of my weakening flashlight. Here was Harold's domain, his workshop, the place he retreated to tinker with radios and electronics even after retirement. And that is when I saw it like a beacon of hope in the darkness. Harold's secret office, the small room within the basement where he kept his ham radio equipment and other electronics. My husband had been something of a technology enthusiast, always ahead of the curve despite our rural location. After retiring from his telecommunications engineering career, he had maintained a fully equipped home office in this hidden corner of our basement. I tried the door, expecting another locked barrier, but it swung open easily. Even 5 years after his death, the room smelled faintly of Harold's pipe tobacco and the electronic scent of warm circuit boards. His radio equipment sat silent and dusty, but intact. There was his old computer, his filing cabinets of technical manuals, and most crucially, what appeared to be a satellite phone in a protective case. Harold had insisted on having backup communication systems. In case of emergency, he always said. Living rurally meant being prepared for anything from blizzards to power outages that could last weeks. The satellite phone had been his concession to my worry whenever he went hunting in the back country. My hands trembled as I lifted it from its case. Would it still work after all this time? The power button did nothing when pressed, the battery long dead. But beside it in the case was a hand crank charger. Harold's thoroughness might just save my life. It took 30 minutes of cranking to generate enough power for a single call or message. My arthritic hands screamed in protest, but I persevered, channeling my fear and rage into the mechanical action. When a faint power light finally blinked on, I nearly wept with relief. The phone was designed for simplicity in emergency situations. No complicated menus or settings. Just the ability to call preset numbers or send basic text messages. I didn't want to call the police yet, not without evidence of what Michael was doing. But I could send a message that would bring him running back. Carefully I typed, "I know all about the debts and your plan. Documentation has been sent to my lawyer." I hesitated before sending. Would this be enough to bring him back? I added, "Return immediately if you want to avoid charges." With a prayer to Harold's spirit for guidance, I pressed send. The message showed as delivered, and I allowed myself the first genuine smile since this nightmare began. Now I needed to prepare for Michael's return. This basement would not only be my salvation, it would be my arsenal. With my message delivered, I began exploring the basement more thoroughly. I had rarely come down here since Harold's death, finding it too painful to see his things gathering dust. But now this forgotten space might hold the key to saving my home, and perhaps even my relationship with my son. Harold had been meticulously organized, a trait that had sometimes driven me crazy during our marriage, but now filled me with gratitude. In his filing cabinet, each drawer was neatly labeled house documents, financial records, telecommunications projects, and most intriguingly, Michael. This last drawer contained everything related to our son: birth certificate, school records, the deed to the farm with both our names on it, and clear instructions that it was to pass to Michael only after my death. But beneath these expected documents, I found something surprising. A thick folder labeled Financial Concerns. Inside were printouts of emails between Harold and Michael dating back 8 years. Requests for loans increasingly large sums. References to temporary cash flow problems and high-yield investment opportunities. Harold's responses were loving but firm, offering smaller amounts than requested and asking for repayment plans. More recent papers from just before Harold's death showed my husband's growing concern. Notes about researching gambling addiction. Printouts about risky investment strategies. A letter to Michael never sent expressing worry about his financial decisions. My heart sank as I realized Harold had been shielding me from the truth. Our son had been in financial trouble for years, and my husband had been quietly trying to help while protecting me from worry. When Harold died, suddenly, Michael must have lost both his moral compass and his financial safety net. Further exploration yielded more disturbing discoveries. In Harold's desk, I found a laptop I had forgotten existed. It still had some battery life, and when I opened it, the screen illuminated to show Harold's email still logged in. The most recent messages were over 5 years old, of course, but scrolling through sent me down another rabbit hole of concern. Harold had been in contact with a financial advisor about Michael seeking ways to help our son without enabling destructive habits. The advisor's assessment was blunt. Michael showed signs of gambling addiction masked as high-risk investing, and was likely in debt far beyond what he had admitted. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Michael wasn't just in some temporary financial bind. He had a serious problem that had been escalating for years. And now, with Harold gone, he had turned to the only substantial asset he could access through me, our family farm. But knowing the truth gave me power. If Michael had forged documents as he claimed, I needed proof to fight him. I continued searching until I found Harold's digital camera in a drawer. It still worked, and I used it to document everything I had discovered, from the emails to the financial records. Next, I needed to find a way to maintain access to the outside world. The satellite phone was working, but its battery was limited. In another stroke of luck, I discovered Harold's emergency generator in a corner of the basement. It was small, designed to power just a few crucial items during outages. Getting it started with my limited strength was a challenge, but after several attempts, the machine sputtered to life. With power now available, I connected the satellite phone charger and Harold's laptop. I had never been as technologically savvy as my husband, but I knew enough to check my email and search for information. Within an hour, I had located our family lawyer's contact information and composed a detailed email explaining the situation, attaching photos of the evidence I had found. I also discovered something that made my blood run cold. Using Harold's password, which he had always kept written in his desk diary, I gained access to our joint accounts. Most had been transferred to my name after his death, but I rarely checked them online, preferring to do my banking in person. The balances were significantly lower than they should have been. Several large withdrawals had been made in the past 3 months, all authorized with my information. Michael hadn't just planned to sell the farm. He had already been stealing from me. With this new information, I updated my message to our lawyer, making it clear that this was an emergency situation. I requested that he contact the local police if he didn't hear from me again within 24 hours, and gave him permission to share all the evidence I was sending. As I worked, a plan began forming. I wouldn't just wait passively for Michael to return. I would be prepared to confront him with evidence of his actions, and give him one chance, one final opportunity to make things right before I involved the authorities. Not because he deserved mercy after what he had done, but because despite everything, he was still my son. And I needed to try one last time to save him, not just from legal consequences, but from himself. By the time I finished my preparations, nearly 24 hours had passed since I had sent the message to Michael. My phone pinged with an incoming text, the sound echoing in the quiet basement. "What lawyer? What documents? I'm coming back. Don't do anything stupid, Mom." The trap was set. Michael was returning, thinking he still had the upper hand. Little did he know that his aging mother had not only escaped his prison, but had uncovered the full extent of his deception. Now I just had to prepare for the confrontation that would determine both our futures. Using the generator's power, I managed to disable the main locks on the exterior basement doors, ensuring I would have an escape route if needed. I gathered my evidence into a folder, charged all the devices I might need, and even found one of Harold's old hunting knives, though I prayed I wouldn't need it. Then I settled in to wait for the return of my son, the stranger who had betrayed me, yet whom I still loved enough to offer one final chance at redemption. 29 hours after sending my message, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Michael had returned, cutting his Cancun vacation dramatically short. From my vantage point in the basement, I could see through the small ground-level windows as his rental car skidded to a stop in the driveway, the door flying open before the engine even shut off. Michael sprinted to the house, his vacation attire of shorts and a wrinkled Hawaiian shirt, a stark contrast to his usual polished appearance. His face was flushed, his movements frantic as he fumbled with his keys at the front door. Mom! His voice bellowed through the house as he entered. Where are you? What lawyer are you talking about? I remained silent in the basement, watching through the security camera feed I had discovered. Harold had installed basic cameras years ago after a series of break-ins at neighboring farms. They still worked connected to a small monitor in his office, giving me eyes on Michael's movements. He ran first to my bedroom, shoving aside the furniture he had used to barricade the door. When he found the room empty, pure panic crossed his face. Mom! The desperation in his voice almost made me waver. Almost. I watched as he searched the house room by room, becoming increasingly agitated. He tried calling someone on his cell phone, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. She got out somehow. No, I don't know how. Yes, she mentioned a lawyer. Of course, I came back immediately. Finally, after nearly 30 minutes of frantic searching, he slumped at the kitchen table, head in his hands. That was my cue. I sent a text to his phone from the satellite device. I'm in the basement. Come alone and unarmed if you want to resolve this privately. On the monitor, I saw him jolt as his phone chimed. His expression cycled through confusion, relief, and fear as he read my message. He sat still for a long moment, visibly gathering himself before standing and moving toward the basement door. I positioned myself at Harold's desk, evidence spread out before me, the generator humming softly in the background. The knife was hidden, but within reach, though. I hoped with every fiber of my being that this confrontation would not turn violent. Despite everything, I couldn't bear the thought of harming my child. The basement door creaked open, and Michael's footsteps descended the stairs, tentative and slow, nothing like his confident stride of days before. Mom? His voice echoed in the large space. Where are you? In your father's office. I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. Michael appeared in the doorway, disheveled and uncertain. His tan from just a day in Cancun highlighted the dark circles under his eyes and the pallor of stress beneath. He looked like a boy again, caught in a lie too big to talk his way out of. How did you get out? He asked, his eyes darting around the space, taking in the generator, the satellite phone, the laptop, and the spread of documents. Your father built this house, Michael. Did you really think he wouldn't have contingency plans, emergency exits, backup systems? I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down. We need to talk. Michael hesitated, then sank into the chair. Whatever you think you know. I know everything, I interrupted, pushing Harold's folder toward him. Your gambling debts, the loans from your father that you never repaid, the money you've been siphoning from my accounts, the forged documents to sell the farm. His face crumpled, decades of deception collapsing under the weight of exposure. You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The market crashed, investments went bad. I just needed to buy some time, get back on my feet. By stealing from your mother, by drugging me and locking me up to starve. I wasn't going to let you starve, he protested weakly. I was coming back. In a week, with barely enough food for 2 days. My voice broke despite my determination to remain strong. I could have died in that room, Michael. Your own mother. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I was desperate. They were threatening me. Who was threatening you? People you don't want to know, Mom. Loan sharks. Guys who don't send late notices, they send people to break your legs. I owe nearly $800,000. I gasped, despite myself. The amount was staggering. And you thought selling my home, my life without my consent was the solution. I didn't know what else to do, he shouted, then immediately seemed to regret his outburst. In a quieter voice, he added, After Dad died, things got worse. I didn't have him to turn to anymore. The gambling got out of control. One bet to fix the last bad bet over and over. Your father knew, I said softly. Not the full extent, perhaps, but he knew you were in trouble. He was trying to find ways to help you without enabling your addiction. Michael looked genuinely surprised. He never said. He was trying to protect me, I think, and trying to find the right way to approach you. But then his heart gave out, and you lost that chance. Silence fell between us, heavy with grief and regret. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows through the small basement windows. We sat in the growing darkness, mother and son connected by blood, but separated by betrayal. What happens now? Michael finally asked, his voice small. Are you going to have me arrested? I had asked myself this same question repeatedly while waiting for him to return. The legal answer was clear. Michael had committed numerous crimes, from forgery to elder abuse to unlawful imprisonment. He deserved to face consequences. But the mother's answer was more complicated. This broken man before me was still my child, still the baby I had nursed through colic and croup, still the boy who had brought me dandelion bouquets and clumsily made Mother's Day cards. Somewhere beneath the desperation and addiction was my Michael. The question was whether that version of my son could be salvaged. That depends on you, I finally said. I've spoken with our family lawyer. He's holding the evidence I've gathered and has instructions to go to the police if anything happens to me or if I don't check in regularly. Michael nodded numbly. I'm offering you one chance, Michael. One path that doesn't end with you in prison. I leaned forward, making sure he met my eyes. You will check yourself into a residential treatment program for gambling addiction. Today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Mom, I can't just... You can and you will if you want to avoid charges. Second, you will work with our lawyer to set up a repayment plan for every penny you've taken from me. It may take years, but you will make restitution. His shoulders slumped. What about the loan sharks? I will help you address those debts, but legally and responsibly. We may need to sell some of the outlying acreage of the farmland we don't actively use, but the house and main property stay in the family. They might not accept partial payment, Michael warned. Then you'll need to work with the authorities to handle that situation too. Running and hiding clearly hasn't solved anything. He buried his face in his hands. I've made such a mess of everything. I don't deserve your help. No, you don't. I agreed, my tone firm, but not cruel. But helping you isn't about what you deserve. It's about what kind of mother I choose to be even now. And I choose to be one who offers her child a chance at redemption, no matter how badly they've stumbled. I stood up, my knees protesting after hours of sitting. But understand this, Michael. This is your one and only chance. If you refuse treatment, if you try to manipulate me again, if you take one step backward instead of forward, I will not hesitate to let the full legal consequences fall on you. My love doesn't mean I'm weak, and it doesn't mean I'm blind anymore. For the first time since he was a small boy, I saw my son cry without restraint. Great heaving sobs that shook his entire body. I didn't move to comfort him. Those tears were necessary, the first honest emotion I'd seen from him in years. I'll go to treatment, he finally whispered. I'll do whatever it takes. I'm so sorry, Mom. So incredibly sorry. I know you are, I said quietly. But now you need to prove it with actions, not words. That night I drove Michael to a treatment facility in Billings. Our family lawyer met us there with paperwork transferring power of attorney not to Michael, but to a trustworthy third party who would help manage my affairs if needed. Michael signed without protest, his earlier arrogance replaced by a shell-shocked compliance. As the intake staff led him away, he turned back once. I love you, Mom. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm going to earn it back somehow. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The door closed behind him, and I was left alone with the aftermath of betrayal and the tentative seed of hope. 6 months have passed since that fateful October day, when my son locked me in my bedroom and told me I would rot there. 6 months of healing, reckoning, and rebuilding, both for me and for Michael. The road hasn't been smooth. After completing 90 days of inpatient treatment, Michael transitioned to an intensive outpatient program while living in a halfway house. He attends Gamblers Anonymous meetings daily and has regular therapy sessions to address not just his addiction, but the underlying issues that fueled it. With the help of our lawyer and a financial counselor, we created a plan to address his debts. We did sell 40 acres of unused land, which provided enough to satisfy the most dangerous creditors. For the rest, Michael has entered into structured payment plans. He found a job at a local marketing firm, nothing like his high-powered finance position, but stable work with colleagues who know his situation and support his recovery. As for me, I've discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. The woman who crawled through a forgotten passage, who outwitted her own son, who offered both accountability and compassion. When it would have been easier to choose just one, that woman surprised even herself. I've installed proper security cameras around the farm. I've made friends with the young deputy sheriff who now checks on me regularly. I've joined a support group for families affected by addiction where I can speak openly about the complicated emotions of loving someone who betrayed my trust so completely. Most importantly, I've learned to set and maintain boundaries. My love for Michael remains unconditional, but my trust must be earned back slowly through consistent actions over time. We speak weekly, but always on my terms. He hasn't returned to the farm yet, as we both agreed that Milestone should wait until his 1-year sobriety date. The tangle of legal issues has been mostly resolved. In exchange for my not pressing charges, Michael signed legally binding agreements regarding the farm and my finances. Our family lawyer now reviews all significant transactions, an extra layer of protection that brings me peace of mind. Scout, my loyal old dog, still keeps me company, though he moves even more slowly these days. Mrs. Abernathy still brings me her famous apple pie every Sunday. The farm continues its seasonal rhythms, the winter snow giving way to spring's first tender shoots. In Harold's basement office, I've created a small memorial. His radio equipment, his engineering manuals, the satellite phone that saved me, all arranged to honor not just his memory, but his foresight. Sometimes I sit there and talk to him, thanking him for the contingency plans he put in place, never imagining they would protect me from our own son. The most profound change, though, is within me. The betrayal could have left me bitter, distrustful of everyone. Instead, it taught me that even at 67, I can find new reserves of courage, wisdom, and resilience. Michael asked me recently during one of our calls how I could possibly offer him another chance after what he did. Because holding on to rage would only imprison me again, I told him, and I've had quite enough of being locked up. He didn't understand at first, but I explained that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or removing consequences. It means refusing to let bitterness consume you. It means recognizing that people can change if given the proper support and held to proper standards. It means believing in the possibility of redemption, even when evidence suggests otherwise. But I locked you up and left you to starve, he said, his voice breaking. I was going to steal your home. Yes, I agreed. And those actions required consequences. But they don't have to define our entire future unless we let them. The relationship we're rebuilding isn't the same as before. It's more honest, more clear-eyed. We talk about difficult things now, instead of pretending they don't exist. We acknowledge pain, instead of burying it beneath pleasantries. Sometimes I still wake in the night, heart pounding, remembering the sound of that bedroom door locking. The terror of abandonment. The realization that my own child could see me as nothing more than an obstacle. On those nights I get up and walk through my home, touching the walls Harold built, looking out at the land we loved, reminding myself that I am free and safe and strong. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that the boundaries we set with those we love are not walls to keep them away, but rather the foundations upon which healthy relationships can be built. My son needed those boundaries long before his addiction spiraled to the point of criminal behavior. Harold and I both failed him by not establishing them clearly enough, by protecting him from consequences that might have prevented bigger ones later. But it's never too late to learn to grow to heal. Not for a son who lost his way, and not for a mother who found her strength in the darkest of places. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you love, or have you ever discovered strength in yourself that you never knew was there? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story touched you in any way, please like and subscribe to hear more about my journey of healing. Thank you for listening. And remember, even in our darkest moments, we are never truly alone.